Welcome to a Nevada Commission on Ethics mini training video. Today's video will be going over understanding what commitments in a private capacity means. In the ethics law, there are certain relationships that trigger a commitment in a private capacity, which then has implications for the ethics law. I'm Executive Director Ross Armstrong, and I will be walking us through the presentation today. The objectives for today is that by the end of this video, you'll understand what a commitment in private capacity means, and you'll have some tips for compliance related to commitments in a private capacity. There are 6 types of relationships that the Nevada ethics law deems that you have a commitment in a private capacity to that individual. The first is a spouse or domestic partner, includes members of households, anyone within the 3rd degree of consanguinity or affinity, someone who employs the public officer, or the spouse or domestic partner of the public officer, or an employee of the member of the household, or an employee of the public officer, somebody that you have a substantial and continuing business relationship with. And then the 6th one is substantially similar, which is sort of a catch-all, and we'll go into that in more detail. But these are the 6 types of relationships you want to keep in mind while you're thinking about actions you're taking in your public role and how they might be affecting one of these individuals. If your decision making or action is going to affect somebody who you have one of these 6 relationships with, you're going to want to work with your agency attorney to figure out what your obligations are under the ethics law. So it's important because these relationships automatically trigger Nevada ethics law implications. In fact, it's the term commitment in private capacity is found over 15 times in the Nevada ethics law. And so it's important to understand what a commitment in a private capacity is. Let's start with the 3rd degree of consanguinity, which is actual, legal blood relationship you have with someone, or affinity, so by marriage, blood or marriage. The Nevada ethics law is triggered. You have a commitment in a private capacity when the individual that might be benefiting from your government action or affected by your government action is within the 3rd degree of consanguinity. And so on the slide here, you'll see a typical consanguinity chart, which shows relations to other individuals. You yourself, if you're looking at this, are the box on the upper left that is blank. And all of those relationships that are red in this particular grouping, or have the number 3 or less on the box, that means they're within the 3rd degree of consanguinity. Their spouses or partners are going to be by affinity. And so if you're taking a look at some sort of public action, it's going to affect somebody who is in that 3rd degree of consanguinity for you, the ethics law is going to be implicated in your decision making, and you'll want to make sure you're following the ethics rules surrounding that. The other one that is not as intuitive as, say, a spouse or member of the household is substantially similar. And this is a catch-all that understands there are relationships other than those specifically listed that create such a interwoven relationship, or so substantially similar to those other listed relationships that you have a commitment in a private capacity to those people too. So some examples. Service on a nonprofit board of directors is substantially similar to someone you have a continuing business relationship with. So if you're a public officer or employee and you sit on a nonprofit board of directors, and you're going to be making a decision that affects that nonprofit, you want to take a look at what you need to do to be in compliance with the ethics law in your public actions. Another example would be service as a volunteer firefighter. Even though you're not getting paid by that volunteer fire department, you have a substantially similar commitment to that entity as you would an employer. And then long-standing and extensive friendships are substantially similar to relationships within the 3rd degree of consanguinity. So this covers your close friends, right? Which makes sense. I think when you take a look at the 3rd degree of consanguinity chart, there are some folks that are within that 3rd degree that you may not have a super close relationship with. Ethics law doesn't question how close that relationship is. If you're within that 3rd degree of consanguinity, you have a commitment in a private capacity. It's much more likely that you have friends that you're much closer with, that you have a lot more interaction with and commitment to than some of those folks in the consanguinity chart. And so long and extensive friendships will trigger a commitment in a private capacity, which then of course means there are ethical implications if you're going to be making a decision that affects someone you have a long-standing and extensive friendship with. So where do we see commitment in a private capacity in the ethics law? In all of these different ethics provisions that create potential violations for you as a public officer or employee, you'll be needing to think about gifts to anyone that you have a commitment in a private capacity to. You are prohibited from providing unwarranted privileges to anyone you have a commitment in a private capacity to. And then there are also contracting and revenue restrictions, misuse of government information to benefit somebody you have a commitment in private capacity to. Really anything where you are using government resources to benefit someone you have a commitment in private capacity to, you're going to find an ethics violation associated with that behavior. In addition to just the basic ethics violations on conduct and not benefiting someone you have a commitment in a private capacity to, if you have an action before you that's going to benefit someone who falls into one of those 6 relationship categories, you're going to want to take a close look at the requirements for disclosure and abstention. You want to take a look at those requirements prior to taking the government action, because in terms of a disclosure and an abstention, you need to be making it before the action takes place. And there's a requirement to abstain from action if there's a direct impact on someone you have a commitment to in a private capacity. There are some nuances about abstention that relate to a presumption of participation in government work, but you're going to want to be thinking about, okay, who do you have a commitment in private capacity to before you actually take an action that might benefit them. So here are 3 tips for compliance as it relates to commitments in a private capacity that will help you maintain compliance with the ethics law. First, create and maintain a list of commitments that you have in a private capacity. So as we've gone through this, if we had the 3rd degree of consanguinity chart, you're probably thinking in your head, okay, well, I have this family member and this family member, they're within that 3rd degree. I should be aware of that. You know, if you sit on a nonprofit board, if you have a private business that you're involved with, if you just sit down, and write in or keep a file somewhere of your commitments in a private capacity, the process of just thinking about it for a moment, stopping and thinking about it for a moment will help you be more aware of when you might have agency actions you're taking that benefit someone you have a commitment in private capacity to. If you are a voting member of a board or commission, or you otherwise have the authority to make agency actions or determinations, you're going to want to carefully review agendas prior to meetings for anyone that might be on that list of commitments in a private capacity that you have, or other documents related to your agency decision making to ensure that you are able to spot someone that has one of those special relationships to you prior to making the action. That helps you understand whether you need to disclose, and abstain, if you need to take some other action in order to maintain compliance with the ethics law. And then the 3rd one is consult your agency attorney prior to taking any action when you think that you're about to take some sort of government action that might benefit someone that falls in one of those 6 relationships. Remember, that's spouse or domestic partner, member of the household, 3rd degree of consanguinity or affinity, employee or employer, substantial and continuing business relationship, or a relationship that is substantially similar to the others. So that is it for this quick video on commitments in a private capacity. Again, we went over the 6 types of relationships that will trigger a commitment in a private capacity. We let you know that there are a lot of ethics provisions that relate to having a commitment in a private capacity. And we provided some tips on how to maintain compliance, which really the first step is to just be thinking about, okay, who in my life falls into one of those 6 categories we talked about during the video. So thank you for joining us for this quick educational video. Of course, if you have follow-up questions, you're free to contact us at our website or email, or give us a call. We also are regularly providing additional educational material on our Twitter and our Instagram account, so give us a follow there. And thank you once again for taking time out of your day to learn a little bit more about the Nevada ethics law. Have a good one.